Good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Jacobs. Joining me here today is ESPN broadcaster Dave Lamont to discuss West Virginia's official defection to the Big 12. Dave, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I happen to be in Big 12 country, too, right now in Austin. So a little bit of talk about that here.
Yeah, interesting. West Virginia, the Big East member since 1995, is now off to the Big 12, leaving the Big East in even further disarray. And with TCU, you now have a new-looking Big 12 whenever the teams end up joining. What's your opinion of all this crazy conference alignment?
Well, it's one of those things where I don't really like it, but I also can't do anything about it. So we're all just going to have to accept it. And there's more on the way. There's a lot of pressure on the Big East to do something, and rather than just continue to lose teams. And so they've been talking with all sorts of schools about football only, and then you've got Rick Pitino who wants to get Memphis and Temple in the conference in basketball only. The Big East is going to change even more than it already is. Right now, they're the biggest losers in all of this. In talking with Mac Brown at Texas Today, he's happy about West Virginia because he thinks it's now going to stabilize the Big 12. He doesn't think that conference is going to be changing anytime soon after this move, which is going to be for the 2012 and 13 year.
And the Big 12 now seems content to be at 10, and the Big 10 is at 12. Just mass confusion all over the place. Thank God the Pac-12 got their name right. So we have a lot of chaos going on in college football. One thing that just boggles my mind is West Virginia is not in Big 12 country. So no. I don't understand this regionally whatsoever.
Well, there was some talk that Louisville would be a better fit because geographically they're a better fit. There's an opportunity for parents to make the trip to Kentucky is a lot easier than going to West Virginia. But Pittsburgh was also mentioned and one of the things that I don't think fans think much about, but administrators and coaches certainly think about is travel. Not just for the football teams who travel fairly well, but for all the teams. You know, not every team charters, okay? The Texas swim team, while it may be very good, doesn't, as far as I know, use a charter plane. Or some of these other smaller, the so-called non-revenue sports, they don't use charters. They go commercially. Morgantown, not the easiest place in the country to get to. A lot of driving from Pittsburgh. And those things are overlooked, I think, by the sports fan. Some of the difficulties of moving. That's why you have to have, if you're going to have a Big East with Air Force, you can only, in Boise State, it can only be for football. Maybe you can convince some of your supporters to go out there, but you certainly can't do it if you are expecting to do this year-round with every single sport.
And then there was talk you could have Conference USA merging with the Big East, and you could have teams like UCF playing Hawaii as conference rivals. I mean, there has to be someone out there who goes, look, this is ridiculous. You're talking thousands of miles away for a conference game. Why bother having conferences if you're just going to play all across the country?
Well, I think the thing that I'm concerned about, first off, as far as those other so-called smaller conferences are concerned, they're going to have to act or they're going to lose members too. So I'm okay with a big conference if you set it up geographically for it to make sense. In other words, if you really do get Hawaii in this thing, that's fine, but it's got to have primarily West Coast. But don't forget, Hawaii said to play in Louisiana Tech and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
From the WAC. So, and Louisiana Tech makes no sense in the WAC. It's in Ruston, Louisiana, for God's sakes. I've been there. I know it's not very west. So I think you could do that if you have an east and a south and maybe a west and a midwest or a north. Then I'm okay with that. And you just have to make geographic sense. It has to make financial sense. Football is the only thing that's driving this. Basketball has been stunted, has been shunned by all of this, which bothers me a little bit. And the ultimate of that is Syracuse leaving the Big East when they're such an important part of that conference in basketball. It's great for the ACC in hoops, but that's the one thing I just think that everybody's so in love with the dollar signs, the traditional rivalries. I mean, here I am in Austin, and we're done with the Texas A&M rivalry in football. Done. That's over.
And what's the pulse in Austin about that? And you said you talked to Mac Brown, Have you talked to anyone else about the addition of West Virginia and what it means and what their feelings are towards this whole conference realignment? I
haven't. I mean, the official word broke down today, and so Mac said, laughing, said, I just heard about that today, and said, well, so did we. His was the only voice in Austin that I've talked to about it. I don't know if the people here are going to be that excited. You're getting a good football program. You're getting a pretty good basketball program, too, so that's the good news. But recruiting-wise, it probably helps West Virginia more than it helps Texas.
And Bob Huggins is back in the Big 12.
Yeah, that'll be fun. But I don't know, maybe not. But I just don't know if it's going to here's what it's going to take. In order to bump up those two, they're going to have some big football games. And certainly the folks in Morgantown get worked up over their team. Obviously, we know the folks here get worked up over their teams, but it's just not a natural rivalry geographically with anybody in the Big 12 in West Virginia. You don't really have any kind of history.
And I think it benefits West Virginia probably more so in terms of now you've got teams like Oklahoma and Texas and Oklahoma State coming to West Virginia in the future, and those are exciting, marketable home games compared to Rutgers, USF, some of these other games. I know Pitt is a big natural rivalry, and I'm curious what happens with the Pitt rivalry, but
I hope we keep it somehow. That's the part. I don't know. I'm old-fashioned about my college sports. I like rivalries. I like the fact that some things don't change in this game, and the fact that we're going to lose some rivalries over this, or we're not going to see Texas and Texas A&M. We might not see Pitt and West Virginia anymore. That I don't care for at all, and that's just the negative of all of this conference alignment for money and television money.
So the Big 12 basically adds TCU and West Virginia as of now. They end up losing Colorado and Nebraska. We assume Missouri, and for sure Texas A&M. They went from 12 to 10, but from all that's gone on, not that bad of a position for the Big 12 after everything that's happened and the doomsday theorists that thought this conference was gone.
No, I think the West Virginia thing is a great get for them, and it's stability, which they were not. I mean, they were really floundering for the last 2 years. Let's not forget that all this stuff started a year ago. And, it did have a lot to do with the anger and the jealousy over the Longhorn Network, which, I'll happen to be working for tomorrow night. But now Nebraska was clearly bothered by it, but I could see Nebraska in the Big Ten. That didn't bother me too much. TCU really belongs in the Big 12, and this was a great opportunity for them now. They're right in the heart. If you're a parent who's got a kid who's playing games at TCU, whatever sport, you are not going to have to travel that far to see him or her play. A little bit different with West Virginia, obviously, but at least they got a same school. We're assuming that academically they fit in because that was allegedly a problem that the SEC had with West Virginia. Missouri and the SEC, to me, is an absolute joke. They're going to get buried there. Their football program is, unless they really do something, and Gary Pinkel's done a wonderful job there. And I've heard that Missouri may wind up in the Eastern Division, so the travel considerations there are ridiculous.
And you have Texas A&M. A lot of people are like, well, why is Texas A&M? Yeah, they're trying to get out of the shadow of Texas, but are they going to do any better? They'll probably end up in the West, I'm imagining. Yeah, and you've got those powers. So it looks good on paper, but success-wise, I'm not so sure that they're set up to be any more successful or have any better of an opportunity than they already do in the Big 12.
Wiser voices than I were saying that Texas A&M should not move. They should stay right where they are. They're going to be competitive that way, but they really face a huge risk with their football program getting beat up in the SEC, and I can't guarantee that's what's going to happen, but that certainly seems like a pretty good possibility.
Is UConn the next domino to drop? Are they pretty much halfway out the door, just waiting for the ACC to come a-calling? Or is that not as
necessarily the ACC come calling, I mean, UConn has really stuck their neck out, and so far nobody is offering to pick them up. I mean, they've alienated, I'm sure, some members of the Big East with their very flagrant attempts to get out, but at the same time, all of that has not gotten them anything. They're not out. And they've got their own issues now with this academic progress report that's come up that talking about that they wouldn't have been eligible last year and that they may not be eligible in 2 years to play in the NCAA tournament. So they've got issues outside of just figuring out what conference they're going to wind up in. I think they belong in the Big East, but we have no idea what the Big East is going to look like for football or basketball in the next 6 months at all. No idea.
Louisville's in a strange position because Louisville, Rick Pitino was lobbying hard, as you said, for Memphis and Temple, which makes great sense in basketball. But Louisville was basically 3 feet out the door, and then the Big 12 shut it on them and said, no, we're going to stay where we are. So how awkward of a position is Louisville in right now? Because the Big East is sort of banking on them to keep this conference alive, but really there's no loyalty whatsoever, it feels like. Everybody's trying to get theirs, and it just feels like it's free-for-all.
Well, I think loyalty is, it's interesting you use that word because you're right, loyalty has left us in a lot of ways. And I just, I sometimes wonder what's going through the minds of these decision makers. But the Louisville situation, I never saw them as being in the Big 12. I think they're going to stay in the Big East, however that's constituted in the next few months. But I think, I will say this for Pitino, arguably as high a profile coach as you have in the conference in either sport, and he is pushing for the conference to do something. At the moment, as I said at the top of the interview, the Big East is the biggest loser here. They're an okay football conference. West Virginia being good but not necessarily great, they have really nothing else. All their teams do basically is beat on each other. And they need an identity in something, and maybe by adding these other schools and making this ridiculously strong basketball conference to go along with the ACC, that'll help them.
I'm going to get you out on this one. Boise State, does it make sense for them to make what some are calling a lateral move to go to the Big East? First of all, forget travel considerations. If you couple them with Air Force and Navy and Army and the Canadian military and I mean every Air Force academy that you could think of. But no, in all seriousness, if you couple them with all those schools, and yeah, they might hold on to the BCS for a couple of years, the BCS automatic qualifying status. But is that really a move that's going to make any long-term sense for Boise State?
No, I don't think it does now. With a weakened Big East in football, and with everybody already criticizing Boise for their conference they're in now and people who just don't respect them. No, I don't see if it makes, even if it's just in football, which would only be in football. No, I don't think so anymore. I just don't. Who else is going to be in that conference to play football that's going to challenge them? Now, admittedly, they may be due for a drop-off after this year with Kellen Moore not being around. And this whole thing may end up, they may go back into, but they may not. They may be attracting, I know they are attracting better football players all the time. So Boise in the Big East would have made sense if the Big East were a little bit better, but it doesn't, the Big 12 would have made a lot more sense, but that didn't happen, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, if Boise State does go to the Big East, you have Utah in the Pac-12, you'd have Boise State in the Big East, and you'd have TCU in the Big 12. And so all those teams that have griped for years about not being allowed into the dance, well, they've got a chance, for better or worse. I'm not sure I like their odds, but...
No, the good news is ultimately we play it out on the field, and that's where the fun is.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time breaking down the crazy world of conference realignment. Dave Lamont, thanks for joining us. And so what games are you broadcasting tomorrow?
Well, I'll be in the Longhorn Network. Kansas, the worst defensive team in the country, brings that group in to take on Texas. And you'll also see me Tuesday, if you want, in Northern Illinois, Toledo, and ESPN2. And then the following Friday, I'll be USC, Colorado on ESPN.
There you have it, folks. Dave, thanks again.
My pleasure.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. You bet, Scott. Take care. Anytime.